All right, Dwayne, very interested in coevolution and the impact on experience. Yes, definitely. Okay, welcome everybody. Very excited for, this is our July meetup for UXPA DC. Tonight, we're really excited to present a talk and workshop with Sunny Stueve on human-centered AI, and she'll talk a little bit more about what that means. Before we get into that, just a little bit of housekeeping. I think one of the things that we've started doing was setting up a mural board for people who are on the calls. I definitely know, like, we've been trying to adapt in UXPDC to this online format. If you haven't seen the job board yet, if you have a job to share or are looking for a position, please, feel free to add a post-it note up there. Also, before we get started, we think it's important to recognize that we are currently all on land, whether we're in person or remote, where people have not been treated equally. And as an organization, we're always looking for ways to be more inclusive, and it's important for us to acknowledge what came before us. So for tonight's program, we'll talk a little bit about what's going on in UXPA and our UXPA. And I have a word from our sponsor, Media Barn, and then we'll get right to the talk with on human-centered AI. And then we should have a little bit of time for questions and answers towards the end. But a couple of just sort of rules of engagement for tonight. Definitely please be respectful in the comments, and feel free to use chat to connect with each other. But again, be kind and come, from a point of grace. We'll also be keeping an eye out for questions in the chat. So if anything comes up or there's a question you want to ask or anything like that, we'll start keeping track of those and try to help moderate if it gets really busy. Usually, I think in this online format, we've gotten used to it and things are generally pretty casual. So, we really haven't had any major issues. But Lauren Enberg and I will be hanging out and to help moderate. All right. So UXPA DC, for anybody that's new who's just joining us, we are the DC chapter of UXPA International. We've been around for about 20 years, which I think, is that not the correct link there? I'll post it once I get through the remarks here. I'm getting some messages that the mural job board is asking people to register. I'll correct that with the visitor link in chat here in a second. But yeah, so for UXPA DC, we've been around for about 20 years. It goes back to when it was called the Usability Professionals Association, and has long been a monthly meetup style group, even before there was Meetup, I think. And we've been really, really happy to keep that tradition going. We also organize conferences. I think you may remember the DCUX conference from 2019, which was sort of one of our last big events before we all went into quarantine. But we're looking forward to being able to present those types of workshops again, and hopefully in the near future. I'll talk a bit about upcoming events in a second. But to get involved, join us on DCUX Slack. I'll put the link in the chat here as well. And we are always looking for more organizers. I think right now we are, we're coming out of this sort of extended online period, and we're starting to think about how do we get back to in-person events? What kind of workshops can we do? What kind of events can happen? And really, the organization itself has changed a lot in 20 years and what the organization needs to be. So we're looking for more people interested in helping out. Traditionally, we've always held elections. I think we're going to do it a little bit differently this time around. The elections have always kind of felt like applying for a second job and have often been a little overwhelming. So for anybody who's out there that may be interested in getting more involved in community leadership, we could use help with just about everything: event planning, communications, rebuilding the UXPA DDC website, social media, you name it. If you have an idea, we would love to talk to you. Also, we're looking for speakers. One of the things that when we were looking at the year ahead in January, we really believe passionately in trying to bring new speakers and new voices from the DC and sort of the DMV area community to talk about UX and to create those sort of opportunities. So if you've never given a talk before, but it's something you're interested in, we have a lot of experienced presenters too that would be very, very happy to help you develop an idea too. So even if you don't have a topic, quite yet, but know that you just kind of feel compelled to give a presentation, or it's something you've been wanting to work on, let us know. We'd be happy to help you develop something. And to do that, feel free to email us at events@uxpadc.org, or you can contact me on DCUX Slack at Jordan Higgins. Okay. Upcoming events. The next big event that's coming up is UXPA International 2021. This is going to be an in-person conference in Baltimore, Maryland. Just out of curiosity, is anybody here planning on going to that? Do we have anybody that's already signed up to go? I know we've got at least one or two on the call.
Yes, I'm going. This is Bhuvana.
Oh, hi.
I'm presenting. Hi, I'm the one that reached out to you on LinkedIn.
Yes.
Post last event, and thank you. I think your contact kind of reminded them that there is an event called Poster Session, and then we had a bunch of emails from UXPA International giving us instructions on what we need to do for the poster presentation. So thank you for making that happen.
Absolutely. I'm glad that worked out. And
yeah,
then I think we were also. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just saying, I'm speaking at that at the event. That's pretty much what I want to say.
Oh, very cool. What are you going to be talking about there?
I'm going to talk about sizing user stories. This is Agile UX that I will be talking about. I'm very interested in one of our speakers that I think is also interested in Agile related work. I'm going to talk about the importance of sizing user stories right, so that they often are a point of negotiation between the delivery team and the client.
Mm-hmm.
And it is important to get the sizing right so that we can have our estimates in place and so on and so forth. So as a UX person, I've often found myself being on the writing side of the UX stories, and I put together some ideas about how important it is to size the story just right so that it can fit in a sprint and not become an epic or something greater, which will lead to scope creep and things of that nature.
Cool. That sounds like a great topic. And I know we had also talked about doing a future presentation for UXPADC. So let's follow up on that after this, because I think that could be really cool. Also, I see Dwayne and Degler in the chat here doing a Thursday talk. Dwayne, I'm going to put a plug in for that as well. I saw Dwayne's talk with Carol Smith on AI at the Information Architecture Conference. And it was one of those things that I just walked away just fired up and completely inspired. And it was actually one of the things that got us to thinking that we should do an event locally as well on this topic specifically, that artificial intelligence and this relationship with technology is going to be really important coming forwards.
Good to hear that.
So,
yeah, actually for UXPA, Rachel Singers and I are talking about mixed language interfaces, when you've got different languages that have to coexist on the interfaces and multilingual sites and that sort of thing.
Okay, so I'll say this: if I'm only able to make it one day, I'm going to try to make sure that it's Thursday, because this would be another topic not to miss. And Dwayne, you're such a great presenter. I would definitely want to check that out. But cool. So yeah, so it's coming up on August 31st. And again, UXPA, they are the international organization that we are, just a local chapter of. But I put the link in the chat there. Check it out, and if you're able to attend, it's they've been putting a lot of time and put it together an amazing program, and very excited about getting they've been working very hard to also make sure that it's safe to host an in-person event again. I know there's been some concerns about that, but from everything I've been seeing from the planning, it looks like they're really doing a good job of trying to take that into consideration. So please check them out, and worth going to. Okay, next up, would like to definitely give a shout out to Media Barn. Media Barn and UXPADC go way back. They've long been a fantastic supporter of, and helped us keep going through, I think through more difficult times than we ever anticipated. But Mauro, would you like to say a few words about Media Barn?
Yeah, thanks, Jordan. I appreciate it. Hi, I'm Mauro with Media Barn. Media Barn is a kind of a unique human-centered design practice located in Arlington. I lead the placement services division, but we also have a full-fledged design agency in-house as well that partners with large government and corporate clients around the DC area as well as nationally. And then we have a full research arm and usability and testing lab on site as well. So we can do both in-person testing as well as remote testing. We have the two-way mirrors, the whole thing. So, depending where our clients' needs are, we can help them with a placement, or we can take on the full project, or just help them with their research needs as well. So if anyone has any needs or has any questions, feel free to reach out. Love to chat.
Very cool. Thank you, Mauro. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Again, I'm incredibly excited that Sunny agreed to present on this topic for us. Sunny and I used to be colleagues, and then when I saw that she was moved into a new position at Leidos as their lead for artificial intelligence, I was thrilled and very, very happy to that she was able to do this topic for us. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Sunny. So let me go ahead and make you the host.
Sure.
And then
and then I'll share my slides. Yes, I'm going to click yes. Thank you, Jordan. I was really excited when you reached out, but I do want to set some expectations. I'm new to the position. I am not an AI expert, so I'm really talking I'll lay out the landscape that I'm working in right now. And as I'm learning, I'm realizing so is everyone else. And so I wanted to have this conversation, and I'm glad folks are joining, because I think it needs to be a conversation, and we need to be learning from one another and sharing our lessons learned, because this is a new convergence of two fields that have been around for quite a while, but now creating a unique challenge for us. So yes, I am Sunny Stueve. I am the lead UX architect for artificial intelligence at Leidos. I do want to say I am not representing Leidos in this talk. I'm representing myself as part of this community, and my experience with my career at Leidos and other places. And with that, I'll kick it off. So first of all, we're probably all coming from different levels of understanding of what artificial intelligence is. I wanted to provide some basic kind of textbook explanations here. What is artificial intelligence? Part of our workshop, our hands-on workshop at the end of this, we'll brainstorm what that term brings up for us and kind of share those ideas. But this is a textbook definition, and it's honestly simulating human intelligence, right? And this description, this definition is kind of the future state, the future goal. When I say AI throughout this presentation, I'm probably talking more about machine learning, which is kind of where we are on the kind of technical roadmap to AI. That's what most AI technologies that we're familiar with, they're really in the machine learning, and you'll see AI, ML all over the place. And when we're talking about current products and tools, most likely we're talking about machine learning. And I don't need to read you the definition, but really machine learning is training algorithms and models off of large amounts of data to look at relationships and patterns and make predictions and recommendations. So that's AI, and there's of course amazing hierarchies of training out there, as deep as you want to dive, very hot field. And like I mentioned before we started, you're as UX professionals, a lot of your projects are going to start throwing these terms around. So I like that we're getting together early to kind of learn together and learn from one another. So no, but really, what is AI? Textbook definitions don't really help, but as UX professionals, I think we know that real life examples definitely help us understand. So pretty common AI that you likely use on a probably near daily basis. When you're searching for things, whether that's online shopping or you're searching terms in Google and you get recommendations, it's AI driven. When you check your commute time on Google Maps, it's AI that's giving you those predictions. And yes, it can be using traffic cams and real life live data. And it is absolutely using the data, your location data off of your phones to say, traffic is slowing down. The typical prediction for this commute is X, and we see based on location data of our users, it's taking a lot longer, and you get a prediction on your phone that your commute is going to be twice as long. That's all AI, and each one of us uses it probably on a near daily basis. Your images on Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat, anytime it's recommending a friend to tag or you apply a filter on your face, that's driven by AI and machine learning and image detection. Your voice assistants, Alexa and Siri, again, all AI and very much driven by the data that you share. Rideshare apps, when it predicts how long it's going to be before your driver comes or what the price is for any given time. Again, AI driven. This is one of my favorite. On any commercial flight that you are taking, there's about, on average, 7 minutes during that flight where an actual human pilot has full control of their aircraft. And those minutes are really reserved for takeoff and landing. Otherwise, it's AI-driven autopilot. Spam filters in our email, our mobile check deposits. It's image analysis. It's detecting handwriting. It's transcribing and transforming that handwriting to text so that you're able to deposit your checks. And I think we all know our credit decisions long gone is a human sitting there and looking at us and trying to understand our life. It's the risk of you defaulting on a loan that's all decided by machines. So that's how we can connect. Most people can connect to AI in our daily life and start to connect the dots. So I want to talk a little bit about the problem space. This is the problem space I'm working in right now. It's that, as I mentioned, UX and HCI and HMI and HCD is not new, not a new field, been around for decades. AI itself, also not new. We've been working in this technology area, again, for decades. But it's the convergence of the two and understanding that technology is far enough along to be releasing products out to the public. And now we need to define and design the experiences for those products. And there are nuances when it comes to the AI that our standards as UX professionals and designers don't marry up to. So, our ISO standards when we're designing graphical user interfaces that we've kind of fallen back on as our framework for, industry standard and best practices in design, they don't necessarily fit anymore for AI. I gave one example here, which is the ISO 9241, where we're supposed to be designing towards what a user would expect, right? And we all do this kind of naturally now if we've been in the UX world for a while, right? When we put an X in the upper corner of a comment box or a pop-up, we don't make it submit a form, right? The user expects that X to close. But when we start talking about user experiences for AI technologies, the users don't yet have expectations. or they may be coming with mistrust. And so there's not a lot of best practices that we can fall back on as designers, as UX professionals working in this world. And additionally, when these standards were created, they were primarily created for graphical user interfaces. And we all know we've moved far beyond the screen. I mean, we have mobile devices, yes, a screen, but we also have complete voice experiences. We have virtual, augmented, and enhanced reality. We have smart systems that mimic human-to-human communication. You know, when we ask Siri or Alexa something, or we walk in our home and say, turn on the lights. These are all user experiences that we as UX professionals need to be designing for. But again, those standards that were created for designing for the screen, they're kind of not totally out the window, but they don't get us there fully when we're designing for AI. And these are two areas that I'm running into a lot. The first one is, yeah, AI technologies can be awesome, right? But cool things alone don't persuade users to use them just because it's cool or it's new or it's novel. And when it comes to AI, people really need to understand how it impacts them, how it solves their problem, and is it doing it safely and in a trustworthy way? And I'll talk about trust quite a bit in a couple of slides. And then the AI world can be very, the development world can be very science project sandboxing, trying out new and cool things. But if we're not keeping that human-centered need at the center, we might be wasting a lot of expensive resources developing cool things that humans don't need or don't want. And so kind of bringing people back to the human problem that the tool may be solving is always important in UX, but really important here because it can be quite an expensive science project if we are not building towards an actual need. So I mentioned a little bit the current state. While these, again, disciplines have been around for decades, the convergence of the two, we're still kind of breaking ground. I only know a handful of UXers that are working specifically in this area. We're definitely not alone, and there's been more than a handful of years where people have been focusing on AI user experiences, but it's still a new area. And there's not a lot of material. There's not a lot of just kind of all the materials that we fall back on, and not a lot of formal education. So there's still not a lot of formal education in the UX field alone. The human-centered AI courses that have started cropping up over really the past couple of years, they usually tend to be a single course, and it's part of the AI engineering and science and data science curriculum, not necessarily in the design world or some of the more traditional UX education programs. So they are cropping up, and there's definitely a need for them, but not a whole lot of material to fall back on. And the biggest focus for me, certainly, but from everyone that I'm talking to working in this area, is trust. And we all know this, not even as UX professionals, just as human beings in the world right now. We know that AI technologies can be biased. They could be spoofed. We don't necessarily trust the news that we read or the things that we see online, and we're worried about our own personal data. So, trust is an issue just as a human being. And it's definitely an issue for the users who need to use and interact with AI technologies as part of their work. And a big area is that there isn't a lot of understanding about how the AI works. And so there's natural mistrust in the output that these tools provide, especially if you're making those high risk decisions like medical decisions and a warfighter. There should be a little bit of inherent mistrust, but my focus is really on what kind of UX strategy can I use to help support users calibrating their trust. We don't want human beings to explicitly and always trust AI because it could be biased or it could be flawed. And in high risk situations, we want a human in the loop making a decision, but we also we don't want to completely mistrust. So I'm really focused on the strategy to help our users calibrate and depending on their problem set and the tool that we're providing as a solution. So trust issues. Jordan Missions, he works in the defense space. I do as well. These are specifically like the Department of Defense, which I really appreciate, called out these areas specifically as their focus areas in AI technology. But this isn't just for the government. There are many commercial companies that are also focused on these key trust areas. And again, we're all human beings. So regardless of UX, I think we can click with all of these, but I'll go through them because they are so important. When it comes to AI, we all want to know if it's fair. Is it behaving in a way that treats us all as humans fairly? Is it detecting and mitigating the biases that can arise when machine learning is applied to data? The algorithms and the models that humans develop are only as good as the humans developing them. And we as humans are inherently biased. So what are we doing as a society and as a US government or as specific companies to detect and mitigate bias and then to communicate how we are doing that to our user bases, because it's incredibly important. And hand in hand with fairness comes ethics and assurance, especially for those high-risk situations or, autonomous cars. We want to make sure that AI is never going to cause certain situations or exhibit certain behaviors, right? We want to make sure if we buy a self-driving car, it is never going to hit a human being. And how can we, as consumers of AI technology, be assured that AI is never going to cause horrific incidents? And is the AI that we're using, is it resilient? Is it always going to work the way we anticipate it? And is it adaptive? My sister she lives in Santa Monica and gets dinner delivered sometimes by a little robot. And, things change in the street. A kid bounces a ball or a car turns from the wrong lane, and that's dinner is a low risk situation, I guess, depending on how hungry you are. But we want to make sure that as the environment changes, can the AI solution adapt? And this next one, explainable, is a big area of discussion. And I get excited by it because it's so important. And I have professional debates with my AI professionals from a UX perspective, what users need as far as explainable AI. If you don't know anything about AI, it seems reasonable that someone who develops an AI model or AI technology can explain exactly what it's doing. But if we get really good at AI and it's mimicking a human, actually, you can't always explain why it's doing what it's doing. You can't always explain how a model derived at its output. And so there's this debate of, sometimes it can't be explainable. And I'm saying from a UX perspective, to build trust, what can we explain? One, we can explain that you can't always explain everything, right? That builds trust. And two, we can explain intent. What was the developer or the scientist trying? What was their intent in developing the technology? We can explain what training data was used. And we trained this model after over X amount of data, images, whatever, and our intent was this, and this is what the AI came up with. We can explain confidence scores and ranking of things, and it might not be a full explanation, but humans don't always need to see inside the black box and get the full explanation of how things work. We just need to calibrate that trust. And so we need enough of an explanation given our problem set to decide whether or not we want to trust what the AI is doing, what it's recommending to us. And so it's an interesting debate area there. And is it secure? AI can be spoofed by bad data, with huge impacts. We already talked about bias and mitigating bias, and this is another aspect of that. It can be attacked. So what are we doing when we are training models and when we are releasing products, what can we do to communicate how secure it is, and making sure that all along the way, from gathering the training sets to designing the algorithms and building the models, that we are making sure that it is safe and secure throughout that process so that we can trust the output. And then to me, the most important, and probably to most of us, is the AI governed? Right? At the end of the day, we want to make sure it's a human being that is creating the rules and having the final say in these AI technologies. I think we all can agree that governance and a real focus on human control is absolutely needed if humans are going to trust AI technologies. All that said, right, it's a new-ish problem area, can't use all of the standards, major trust issues. What still works from a UX perspective? Almost everything we do. I mean, whether it's an AI technology or a regular piece of standard software or virtual reality, we're still going through the same process, right? We're still going to start with discovery. We're doing user research. We're still going to gather our quantitative data and analyze it to set benchmarks. We're making personas, doing the user flows and journeys and interaction. All of the things in UX still apply. But we're making sure that while trust is always important in UX, that we're really tuning into and designing a UX roadmap for that path to trust. So we're talking to the users about, if you received a recommendation from AI, how much would you trust it now for this problem versus that problem? Would you kind of always trust it in one case, never trust it in another? We're really kind of focused on, what parts of your job would you love to just have completely automated away from you so that you can focus on other things? And what parts of your workflow or your job do you have to be the final decision maker? So kind of those key areas of trust, but still the same practices that we've always used. And part of the workshop, I hope to brainstorm some of the actual design aspects that are a little bit different when we're talking about making recommendations on a screen and differentiating those made by AI versus those made by a teammate. And so we still wear the same UX hat, but some key focuses when we're wearing that UX hat for AI is really focusing on defining the problem, as we always do through our research, but also understanding or talking to our AI experts about whether or not AI is even the solution. It's frequently not. Having vast amounts of data that's too difficult for a human being to go through is everyone's problem now, right? And the velocity of data is not slowing down, but you don't always necessarily need an AI solution for that. It could be a standard data analytics and data science and better data visualizations could solve a problem. So wearing our UX hat, once we understand the problem, is AI even the solution? If it is, we play a role now in defining the training data to help build these algorithms and these models. So we can sit down with our AI scientists and help translate that the users are looking for specific objects in an image, or they really need to be able to tag images with certain things, or whatever it may be. And then the AI professionals can properly train on the correct data for that user need. And that's a new role that we have as UX professionals here. Of course, we're designing the experience as we always do, but we're definitely focused on specifically increasing trust. So what kind of icons and content and labels are we using to increase trust of an AI recommendation, for example? We're trying, and then I think I've said trust at least 5,000 times. I'm sure I will say it 5,000 more, but it's key. We are the role on these AI teams focused on gaining trust. So we're really working with the users to help them understand the limitations of the AI. So we talked about the intent of the AI, but also this is an iterative process, right? A model is only as good as the data that it's trained on. And then when we present it to the user, they may say, well, that's not what I expected, or those results don't look very good to me. And so we may retrain or try a different model on the data. And so working with the users and explaining to them that this is a work in progress, and explaining that the results that they see now are improved through their feedback and through more data. It goes a long way in building trust. And then this is really, really key and has been really interesting to me. We are now kind of serving the role of organizational management in some ways. We're explaining to the user, or hoping to explain to the user, the short and long-term impact of the AI solution. So how is it making their life better today? And is it going to automate their jobs away? And while we want to say, no, of course not, that's not really true, right? And in some cases, we are purposely developing technologies that are going to automate large chunks of, or even an entire role away. If we're working with good organizations and we're working with good customers, they have a plan for that disruption in their organization, or they're working towards a plan. So that when we are talking with the end users who we need to help improve this technology, and they know the technology may automate their role away, that their organization has supported them with kind of a path forward. But in many cases, the AI technology or solution is not going to automate a job away, and they don't need to be worried about that. And in fact, the quality of their job is going to improve vastly, because if we think about a job or a role where a human spends a lot of their time looking through kind of arbitrary data to make some decision off of, and it's a huge cognitive burden, and most of the data is irrelevant. And with AI, we can get them only the highest quality data that's the most likely to help them in their workflow. Suddenly their job gets a lot more, it gets a lot richer, it gets a lot more pleasurable, and it frees up time to do other things, whether that's new tasks in their role. Maybe it frees them up to move up into a higher role. But in many cases, the AI is not replacing humans. If it is, hopefully there is an organizational plan for that. But because we are the ones who are talking to the users, we're now in a place where we're dealing with a lot of emotions, quite frankly, the trust emotions, but also, what does this mean for my future? And it's been an interesting, it's been a rewarding challenge, but it's been an interesting challenge for me. I see a lot of chat, and if anybody has a question right now, I'm happy to stop, but if not,
we've been there have been a lot of great questions in the chat here. So actually, I think Lauren's gonna help moderate and kind of just go down them. We're communicating back and forth in Slack, but yeah, maybe we can do some Q&A, and then we could go to the workshop.
Yeah, I think I have just like maybe one more slide, and then we could do Q&A in the workshop. Yeah, I was just noticing that there were a lot of chat, and I was like, yeah, I have a couple more slides, but and then Q&A. Sorry, I interrupted myself. I'm not going to click on these links, but I just want to convey that I'm not the only one working in this space. Clearly, there's a lot of really amazing work being done, even though it is in those early stages. But these are some good resources if you want to learn about what some major corporations are thinking about. The first link, actually, Jordan shared with me, which is a Google, a mini kind of training session for their approach to people in AI research, which they call PAIR. I recommended it. It's really interesting. Definitely focuses on a lot of the key aspects that I talked about here, and then some other links to what other organizations are doing. And then I did want to show a quick a UI, just because I have shown all text and for good reason. There's not a whole lot of great UIs right now that focuses on some of the key things that I was talking about, but this is a good example, and I'm wondering if
actually, Sunny, so I put the link in the chat here, but also, would it be okay to share the slide deck as a file with people?
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, cool. Absolutely.
I'll go ahead and I'm gonna put a link to the PowerPoint presentation.
Okay.
Directly in the chat here.
I'm going to stop sharing my browser. Stop sharing PowerPoint. I'm going to try to share my browser. That's just us inside. So, okay. So this was what I was going to show you. So while I'm doing some of my research, Cornell University, by the way, does have some HCI courses, but I was doing just research and scholarly articles in this area. This is a good article, and it is linked in there, so check this one out. But I scrolled down, and I'm working with a lot of models and knowledge graphs right now, and trying to figure out the best way to present data to the users. And so when I saw this, I thought, oh, cool, what is that? And then connected papers. So I clicked on over here to connected papers, and I really like, this is some of the trust building that I was talking about. They just explain what they can, that this is a graph, it's driven by AI, that it's a force directed graph. They talk about the data source, 50,000 papers, and it's this type of information that the users need to start to build that trust. I don't need to know everything about a force directed graph, but I get it. This wasn't a human connecting these things. This is AI driven. So I like that bit of information. And then when I clicked over here, so here's my graph. And here's my paper in the center. This is my original paper here. And you see, it's not really directly connected to anything else, which can show you just how much is out there. And that we should be thinking and writing about these areas. But when let me see if I can move the Zoom controls. When I click down here on, okay, what am I looking at? I really like just explaining, okay, these papers are arranged according to their similarity. The nodes, so the circles are nodes, the lines are edges. The node size is the number of citations that linked back to a paper. And the color is the publishing year. I mean, this is not very accessible, but that's fine. So these are the types of things I'm starting to deal with, is how do we show on the screen? These graphs are not intuitive, but if you dig into it, they actually help so much and tell such a good story. But from a UX perspective, like I need to explain on the screen all of these things. And this is just one way that while I was literally doing research this week, I saw, so I wanted to share that with you. So I don't know how to switch between sharing, unfortunately. So let me try to go back to my slides. Hopefully you guys can see these. And then I only have a couple more. Oh, it was just leading to the workshop. So before I talk about the workshop, do you want me to answer some questions? And I would like to reiterate that I am not an AI expert. So I will answer what I can.
Hi, Sunny. I'm Lauren.
Hi.
Hi, I've got your questions here. Starting with Kelly Sow. Did I say that right, Sow? Kelly, sorry if I butchered that.
Yeah,
all right. Provocative question. Does the imperative to design for user trust apply equally when most users don't even know a technology is backed by AI? For example, in your commute time prediction example, when the average user doesn't realize that Google is using AI to provide them that information.
Yeah, I like that is a provocative question, and I'm only going to talk about my experience because AI creeps me out. I'm just going to say it. Like when it comes to my personal life and not knowing when something is AI driven, for me personally, it creeps me out a little bit. So I like to explain when something that I like when a user interface tells me when something I am viewing is being driven by AI. And whether that's explicitly on the item that I'm looking at, or it's a statement on that company's website, or whatever the case may be, for me, just as a consumer, especially when like AI can write entire news articles that no human has ever been a part of. I would like to know if that news article is written by an AI technology. There are images of human beings that don't exist, right? That are all created by AI. I want to know if that is friend requesting me on something. So that's just me. I am very kind of mistrustful. So my opinion is that where we can, especially since there is so much to learn about AI and to educate one another on when we can, that whether or not it's seamlessly AI in the background or not, that there should be some statement somewhere explaining what the user is seeing and what the intent is of what the user is seeing, et cetera.
Okay, excellent. Kelly's got another question here. How do you balance the product marketer's imperative, making it look like #1 in the market, with the security concern, communicating clearly and accurately about the security risk to motivate people to take appropriate precautions?
Yeah, I mean, another great question that I don't have the answer to. I just can tell you that it's a super important topic that we all need to be talking about, not only as UX professionals, but as consumers ourselves. As more and more AI technology and machine learning technology advances into all of the products that we use, security, bias detection, and mitigation is a huge topic that we need to take that on as far as our role in the ecosphere of how we're going to do it as UX professionals, and kind of what are our founding principles when it comes to that. I think it's an important topic for us as a community to start talking about and decide what we feel comfortable with and kind of what our best practices are going to be.
Fantastic. Thomas Kennedy, an interesting thing about ML, machine learning, is that the model for a feature can change over time. But does that mean a model initially deemed ethical could one day become something that isn't? As designers, how do we ensure that an ML-driven experience stays transparent and ethical over time?
Yeah, and that's a very important point, and kind of what I was talking about as far as AI and ML models being that work in progress, is being able to first communicate that that model was what the intent was, what the data source was, that it was secure from spoofing. But then also, it's going to change over time when new data comes in and as data changes, and communicating that that's how machine learning works to the user is part of that transparency, transparently communicating. And again, it might not be specifically on the screen there looking at, bold statements or banners across. It might be part of your overall communication and marketing materials and on your website somewhere as disclaimers that just explain that process. Even the example that I showed you today with the connected papers, if you go in and actually read that, they talk about that. Like, this is as good as the papers we have, and it's going to change over time. And it's really communicating upfront and being explicit about the expectations that the user can have, and that's how they calibrate their trust. And when we're not explicit and it later behaves a different way, if we haven't communicated that could happen, or that is a natural process sometimes, then their trust is eroded. Right. So we have to take that into account as we're designing our path to trust. We need to understand the way these AI technologies work and change over time, and communicate that and build that into our UX practices from day one.
Yeah, absolutely. Aparna has a question. How do you bring in trust as a UX professional?
It's a great question. It's a lot of things. So how I'll just speak to how I have in the past with these technologies and kind of what I'm doing now. It's the same kind of practices that we've always done, the discovery and a lot in the research portion of it is that communication, that explicit communication to set expectations from the beginning. And communicating that part that I talked about, the organizational impact that it has. Before I talk to the users, I need to understand what does the higher level of the organization expect this AI solution to do to their organization over time? Are they planning for it to be do they understand that it's disruptive? Are they planning for it to maybe replace or at least greatly change current roles? I need to have that information, not so that I can share it directly with the users, but so that I'm not setting expectations where they're gonna end up not trusting me in the future because of something. So it's the same type of expectation setting that we do anytime we're doing user interactions and human interactions with our user base, but it's focusing on those key areas of ethics and security and their organizational impact that come with the AI technologies.
Okay, wonderful. Kelly has another question. How do you recruit users for early stage AI prototype research? By that, I mean, are there any traits you screen for in particular that are different from normal usability testing?
No, honestly, like, no. When it comes to the actual human being, no, they're human users just like users of any other product, and there isn't anything specifically.
And Twain has a question, and it looks like the last one. In the role of defining training data, is the role, at least in part, identifying, defining the limitations and issues in the data and the context that may limit the data's usefulness?
Yeah, absolutely. And when I talk about kind of the UX role in defining training data, I'm talking like the highest levels. Like, I work with the most amazing AI professionals. They're the ones that actually get into the meat of the data, but I'm able to help them understand the general types of data and information that the user needs to complete their tasks in their workflows. So, for example, I can tell them, hey, it looks like you're gathering a lot of images of cars and images without cars to train a model to detect cars. These users are interested in animals, right? Like, at the highest level, that training data is not going to help them because they're looking to detect a specific species of bird or whatever the case may be. So it's not my role to be a data scientist, but it is my role to communicate, that the value proposition and the end user goals, just like it is in any with any UX project.
All right, and that looks like it's it for the Q&A portion,
Cool.
Unless anyone would like to jump in.
And we have time to chat and answer other questions. So Jordan set up a mural board for us. I wanted something to be kind of interactive because I just talked at you guys for a really long time. And like I said, we're all learning together. And I would love your insight and your ideas and kind of what comes to mind to you from a UX perspective when we talk about AI. So before we head over there, and it's really just brainstorming and kind of throwing ideas on the board, but I wanted to talk about some of the key or the common UX design challenges that I'm running into right now, which is those recommendations made by AI versus a human. So especially if we're working on a team together and we're doing different things with data, and then I log in and it says, we recommend you look at this thing. How am I differentiating that thing is being recommended by a machine versus like Sam, my colleague, who I totally trust, or maybe vice versa. So it's the actual visual design on the screen that how am I differentiating between the machine and the human, and how am I being transparent that maybe search results or things that the human is seeing on the screen is driven by AI? And that's a common challenge right now. And then interactions with data visualizations like knowledge graphs and models, that the example that I showed you of that paper, they're just not intuitive. I've been working with different tools that are approaching it different ways. If we're trying to have a user build out a graph of something that they know about, right? Like do we start with an example graph and then have them correct it? Do we start with a blank page and have them just start putting things on it? So because the visualizations themselves can sometimes not be intuitive, it's a big challenge area. And then I think as a community, we need to talk about like what kind of icons, tags, ratings, rankings, descriptions, content are we using when it comes to these technologies, or should we start suggesting that one another use to start building trust, and not just start building trust, but to maintain trust over time for these. So just want to throw those out there. And I guess now we'll head over to the mural board and just do an icebreaker and then, some brainstorming. Does everyone have that link?
Sounds good. Yeah, I've got the link in the chat.
Cool. So I'm going to stop sharing and then we all can look at the mural board.
Yeah, I can share the mural board screen from here too, so we can see the activity.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, good stuff. Okay, and we've got a bunch of, we've got visiting turtle, fish, rabbit.
So, I'm gonna pick design.
Well, I'll get this started. Stuff that.
Yeah, I started with an icebreaker. And the colors mean nothing on stickies. I just threw some on to get started. And maybe we'll do the icebreaker for 2 minutes. And it's just posting something that you've recently learned. And I'm not fishing for things that you recently learned from my presentation. It could be anything. Oh, the community pool. I've always thought so. Oh my gosh, who posted the Carvana? It's so true. Used cars right now are going crazy. Mine was that I just learned that a groundhog and a woodchuck are the same animal. And apparently everyone has known this forever, but literally I just learned it. And I don't know why I never knew that, but there you go.
I actually just took a picture of this groundhog in Delaware last weekend.
Oh my gosh. And I don't know, I guess I thought no one else knew that. And I told my daughter and she was like, yeah, Mom, they tell us that every Groundhog's Day. And I'm like, gosh, I missed that.
Okay, I definitely didn't know that either, Sunny. So
okay, thank you. Thank you. I was so like, okay.
And how does a marmot fit into that equation? Is it a marmot?
Definitely. No, I definitely think that's a different animal.
Okay, all right.
I think in my mind, a woodchuck just looked like a beaver without a tail, which I guess it kind of does. But because of the woodchuck thing, they were more like a beaver to me. I thought yeah. Anyways, there you go. I love these. All right, cool. Yeah, the 7 minutes of actual human interaction with the plane on average blew me away too. I mean, obviously they're watching the whole time and can intervene, but yeah, it's mostly commercial flights are mostly autopilot.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of like that actually.
Yeah, I think I probably do too. One of
I
the
find it.
one of the cooler things I've seen at MITRE since starting there is they do a lot of work in the aviation space in air traffic control systems, but they have a epic level like jetliner simulator set up there that is really incredible. But if it's only like needed at 7 minutes at a time,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
I guess they do more like routine stuff, but, or like emergency drills and stuff like
Sure.
that.
I would hope. All right, cool. So I'm scrolling over to the middle little frame here. And I just wanted to, kind of do the same brainstorming, just post what you're thinking. So I'm on what does the term AI bring to mind for you? And it could be some of the stuff I talked about today, or also just like in general, because, we're all users too. So it's important to know where we're coming from. I'm posting this robot because, I still think of robots when I think of AI, even though I know we're not there. I love that other people thought of robots. Yeah, tools that save time so I can focus on more complicated things. Like, absolutely. I am a big fan of automating away those things that are just nonsense, so I can focus on kind of more cognitively challenging aspects. Yeah, same thing. Automated processes that humans don't want to do or don't do well. Absolutely. Reducing cognitive load. I mean, as UX professionals, we know how important that is, especially when our tools that we're testing with users have to integrate with dozens of other tools that they use on any given day. Anything that can help reduce that cognitive load is going to be a game changer. Big tech controlling our minds, absolutely. But seriously, I think about that when I hear AI, when I know that entire scholarly articles can be written by machines. I also think about like my safety, my data, my physical self with self-driving cars and everything else. Probably now that you guys know your commercial flights are on autopilot, helping people make better decisions. That's great. I love this one. New opportunities for accessible and inclusive design. Absolutely. That's one of the key areas I'm excited about.
That's one that's really kind of captivated my imagination lately is we've always kind of, in teaching accessibility, we've always kind of struggled a bit with like, we know the sort of the big, broad strokes for physical challenges and like visual challenges.
Yeah.
But some of the ones that are harder to design for, things like cognitive difficulties or adapting to people as they age, things that can learn and work with you and maybe adapt and every time there's like potential for great benefit, then there's also like really scary,
Right.
there's always a flip side of that that's really scary, but if it can be done responsibly, then it seems like there's all these things that have been not really practical to address for accessibility and inclusive design now may be possible.
Right. Absolutely. I think one of the ones that I'm recently kind of firsthand excited about is it's Miro actually.
Yeah.
Miro, but they're really focusing on accessibility. And I do have a coworker who is blind and relies on a screen reader, and he is, while his teams have always used, these types are not always, but have recently used these types of online collaboration tools. He's been able to participate in discussions, but not with what's going on the screen. And so they just released a new feature that's in Miro that allows his screen reader to work as long as it's in frames like we're using now.
Mm-hmm.
And it still can't relay the color of stickies, so we can't associate meaning with color, but he is able to follow along. And it's one small step, but it's exciting because if I could make my distributed remote team member feel more part of our team, then it's going to enrich the work that we're doing. So I'm excited by things like that.
Absolutely. That's really cool.
Awesome. Cool. So yeah, I think we all have a lot of the same thoughts, and we are users, right? We are users of AI every single day. And this is now, if you put on your UX hat, these are the same things our user bases are thinking as we're designing and developing experiences for them. So when I talk about trust so much and designing for that path to trust, it's because we all have this inherent mistrust. We have excitement, right? We do want to automate away some bad parts of our workday, but we are worried about deep fakes and ethical challenges. And so these are the same things that your user base will be coming to the table with. And it's just important to keep that as a centered focus as you're laying things out on the screen, as you're designing your research plan and questions, that not only do you have to make a good tool that solves the correct problem in the best way, but also in a way that the user will trust and adopt it. And I like knowing that we're all kind of thinking the same way when we hear AI, because it's true. So we can feel free to continue to add ideas, but for the last part of the little brainstorming session, I'm moving over to the third frame, UX ideas for AI-driven recommendations. So these are the things, I've talked about it quite a bit tonight, and I think some of the most familiar ones that you can picture in your mind right now are like when you log into Netflix or Amazon, because you watched this movie, we're recommending this to you, or because you bought this product, we're recommending this to you. But also Google, maybe in the last year or so, when you do a Google search, not only does it we all know that it autofills as we start typing a search term in, but also when you hit search and you get your results, now usually they have a little box towards the top that kind of contains things like the latest news on the subject that you put in, or maybe some images, and that's all an AI-driven recommendation based on what other people are searching and the results that those people are clicking on. So those are the recommendations that I'm talking about. But it could also be recommendations like, let's talk about a high risk situation where, let's talk about the commercial flight. It's on autopilot, and an alert comes up because it's detected a storm or a flock of birds or whatever. How do we present that in the screen in a way that gets the user's attention, lets them know that this is a high risk situation or that it's a low risk situation, and helps them start to calibrate their trust. So these could be ideas about anything, but icons, language, layout, anything you want. that's the goal, is just to throw out some ideas so we can talk about it, because I need them. Gotta zoom in a little bit. Framing data points from different perspectives. Yeah, absolutely. Does anyone want to talk a little bit more about that one?
Yeah, for that one, I was just thinking one of the projects I used to work on in a previous life was helping intelligence analysts learn to recognize cognitive biases through games, through creating games that taught people how to understand what cognitive biases were, and then like recognize when they were happening. And it's a challenge, right? Because if it's you're trying to set up the conditions to have someone generate a bias error, and it's kind of like, it's almost always very heavy-handed. It's too obvious. So more just kind of thinking and it's so much of it would depend on context, but like if you've gathered a bunch of data points and putting them together, if you know that someone frequently, let's say is always searching for ice cream, just to put this in an abstract form that's relatively safe. Like if you're always searching for ice cream, but then you might want to say well, these recipes that are in these results, you may be looking at the ice cream ones, but have you considered sorbet, or have you considered not dessert, or things from from another lens. I don't know, that's not actually the best analogy. I need to think that one through a bit, but more just kind of trying to develop an understanding of how you might view a data set or a set of results, and then automatically presenting a frame, almost like the PowerPoint design suggestion for images, but with more like language and context awareness. Kind of like you may be seeing this through this lens, but here's some other ways. I guess it makes me think of that Amazon health wristband that Amazon issues aside, just that's a whole nother talk, I think. But one of the things that fascinates and horrifies me is the idea that it's always listening and can give me feedback on the tone of my voice, which is something that I know I need help with, but I'm not sure I want to get that help from an AI, right? Like I always know that the way that I'm communicating sometimes imparts unintended messages, and I would love to be more self-aware about that. So I don't know that I want it necessarily to be through my Amazon wristband, but kind of like being able to go back and say to take some data points and say well, you might have been looking for this, or you may see this way, but here's another way of looking at the same data set. That feels very fuzzy, but
yeah. Well, a lot of this is very fuzzy. That's why I was excited to come and kind of start conversations around it and get ideas, because it is, and we're gonna try things out that don't work well and improve upon them, hopefully.
yeah.
But a lot of this is, coming from the UX professionals when it comes to the trust, right? Because we're the ones that design what's relayed to the user in the experience. And so it's so important. There's so many good ideas here. I love the point that data models can be racist and confidence scores can have unintended interpretations. Absolutely. You know, something could, well, first of all, yes, the data models, the algorithms are as biased as the human beings who create them. And the confidence scores are relative, right? You could have something that says, you know, this is an incredibly high confidence score of the object in this image being a car. Well, great. If that was the intent of the model and was to detect cars and it detected the car and that's a high confidence score, that's correct. But again, like if I was searching for animals and that was at the top of my result set, right? That confidence score doesn't mean anything to my particular use case. And it's the confidence scores are relative to the intent of the design of the model. And there are ways, like I put good, better, best for results. They're like fuzzy buckets instead of confidence scores where you can say, you know, this is a good result. This is a better, this is the best result type of thing. But that can be misinterpreted as well. Yes, I like the use of, I love the choice to use the AI or not. I think that is so important that, you know, I want to be able to turn this off or ignore something because I am the human that is governing my experience here. And, you know, that is incredibly important for that user trust and adoption. I love the idea of finding resources for violence survivors in the acute moment when they don't trust humans. It's such a good use for AI technology. And signaling when the underlying data is changing while interacting is so key. You know, what's going on? Should I make my decision right now? What's going on behind the scenes? If I hit refresh or if I wait a minute, is it going to be drastically different and would completely, you know, change the decision I was going to make? Signaling to users that there's live stuff, and even if it's not, you know, in the moment, signaling to users that, you know, we ingest new data each night, right? That may change their decisions. Maybe, okay, I'll hold off until the morning. Communicating how the technology is working, what's kind of going on while they're making the decisions is so important. Icons, ranking results, a personalized and common language that is relatable. That's key. And for us content folks on the line, this is something, there's so many terms, there's so many definitions of AI and ML and subcomponents, and they're used differently, and what's a confidence score and all of that. Like, as UX professionals who design in this area, we need to, one, understand those terms, but also what is our language going to be when we represent what's going on in the experience itself. See algorithms of oppression, I will. Easy way to report bias AI results. That's very good. Not only for reporting bias, but just reporting when something's wrong, right? Like I searched for an elephant and I got 9 elephants and a tiger. I want to be able to say that the tiger is not an elephant. And I also want to understand what that means. Is that going to improve the model? Do they take my acceptance or rejection of these recommendations and incorporate it and retrain the model off of it? That's really, really interesting because how are we doing when we talk about the actual visual like components of accepting or rejecting a recommendation, or ranking it ourselves, or recommending it to a teammate. Like, what icons are we using? What components? You know, that's really we are still kind of breaking ground on just that common design component tool set that we can use here.
Hello. I wanted to just share something about rankings and confidence scores and good, better, best results from a project I've been working on. So we've been testing an AI tool that can classify things. And so what we found was we can provide a confidence score, but that confidence score is based on whether or not the model can identify a thing. And that's all it's doing. But users were thinking that if it was a low confidence score, that was a counterfeit thing or a fake thing. And the model wasn't testing for that at all. And so what we determined was to avoid that unintended interpretation, it was better to just display the recommendation or not, and not communicate the confidence score, and instead set a threshold on the back end. So if it's below a certain score, the recommendation just isn't communicated to users. Because so many were misinterpreting that.
Yeah, and it's funny because I've run into the literal exact same situation, and they're so easily misinterpreted. And even if you put like a little info icon, or you put information on the screen that explains it, the user likely isn't going to click on that anyways. But if it's just not intuitive, it's not intuitive. And yeah, it's we took the same approach, which was going into the back end and saying anything, we're only going to show those items with a, confidence score of 95 and above, or whatever the case may be. And it also cleared up the problem. But it's interesting that we ran into the exact same situation. And I've heard it from multiple people. Confidence scores are really tricky when it comes to the UI. Oh yeah, I like that. Also would be interesting to see the side-by-side of the AI versus no AI. That's a really good use for that, is when you have to demo how impactful or successful your AI technology is to a customer, because I have had to do that, and being able to show two users, one trying to get to a certain piece of data just through kind of traditional searching, and then another who is able to use an AI technology, or even on the search results, to turn off recommendations or not, and the impact to the actual user workflow was, it's taking things from multi-minutes down to a few seconds, and there's a really good use case doing that to impact. All right, cool. Well, I am so excited that I was able to chat with you guys and kind of just share some of my experience in this area. I loved the ideas and the feedback. I had some actually good ideas on the mural board that I am definitely going to go and dig into a little bit more. And I shared my LinkedIn profile. Definitely hit me up. But I think we should have more conversations around this. And I know that the folks on the call, if you have not already started working AI projects, you're going to soon. So let's get back together and have some more kind of brainstorming and sharing sessions around this topic.
Definitely. That sounds great. Well, cool. Does anybody have any final questions or thoughts or comments before we call it a night?
I just had one question. First of all, I wanted to say thank you, Sunny. This is awesome. I learned a lot. A question I had is, I don't know if there's an easy answer, but on the ethical side of things, I think we can do what we can to communicate intent to users. But in the enterprise world and in the government world, there can be asks to actually apply AI in unethical ways that has nothing to do with the user, but it has to do with the features of a product. And so is there a way, or is that the designer's responsibility to keep tabs on that and keep tabs on maybe how an AI is being applied across a system, where we can communicate all we want to users, but maybe the feature itself that's being asked for by stakeholders or clients is doing something that might be considered unethical.
Yeah, I think you're right. There is no easy answer. and I will just, kind of give my thoughts representing only me. I think, in a way, any product that we're building, regardless of whether or not it's AI, could have ethical concerns and impacts. And us as designers, we need to decide our own stance on things and our own threshold. And do we want to work on projects like that, or for companies or customers that would skate ethical lines, and I think we as individual practitioners, that's something that we have to decide. I will say I am very happy. I do work in the defense area a lot about DoD's ethical principles for ethical and trusted AI, and they are the key areas that I did share on that one page. And you can go look them up, but I mean it explicitly states that part of their process is to ensure that AI technologies are being used in ethical ways, and I think there's good, whether it's government entities or corporations, are coming forth and making those statements because they do understand that they are so important to our society. So, I mean, no easy answer. I don't know that there's something specifically that us as individual UXers can do, other than know our own stance on it, and hopefully share in like-minded communities and come to the same stance, and then work together and work with good corporations and good companies that align to our values. But yeah, I wish there was an easier answer there. I wish it was that no human would ever use it for anything unethical, but unfortunately.
In Europe, there's like EU standards in the government, like very, very explicit, but I think in the US it's like department based and it's not uniform.
Yeah. And I'm absolutely with you, because I share the same kind of fears that we've all shared here on these. And I know where I stand on the issue, and I choose to only work with those kind of communities that stand in the same place I do.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lisa also just posted a great link in the chat for Carol Smith's Designing Ethical AI Checklist and Agreement. This is, definitely recommend checking this out. And I'll share it on the screen here too. But yeah, fantastic. Cool. Any other thoughts or questions? All right. Well, thank you everybody for attending and joining us tonight. And Sunny, so great to catch up with you and to hear this talk. I'm very excited about the work that you're doing and can't wait to see how it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all. And we will definitely keep in touch and continue this conversation.
Sounds good. Thank you, everybody. Stay tuned for our next event in August, still to be determined, but we'll be announcing it soon. And yeah, we'll look forward to staying connected on DCUX Slack. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.